Hello everyone and welcome to William Publishing's YouTube channel. So today we're going to talk about printing. It's one of the things that I have discovered that many self-published authors, especially first-time authors, that they actually neglect, because printing is not just about printing. There's quite a number of things that one needs to be aware of even at the planning stage, in terms of the book size, in terms of the layout of the book, and just preparing the manuscript and preparing the book cover for printing. So today I'm going to cover the aspect of preparing a book cover for printing and preparing a manuscript for printing. Now, if you haven't as yet, please do subscribe and click on the notification bell, and do like this video if you like the content that we are sharing on this channel. Let's get right into the topic for today. Now let's start with the book cover. So with the book cover, I will not cover the part about designing it per se, but I will cover the aspect of preparing it for printing, right? So with the book cover, the first thing that you need to understand is that you need to know the size of the book, what the final print size will be, right? Give an example. So if the book cover has been designed with the mindset that the book will be an A5, right? Let's say you choose, okay, it's going to be an A5 book, and you design it, right? And then the designer for the inside of the book and the typesetter, they then design the book in terms of the size, and they find out after that they've chosen the book the size of the font, the number of words per page. They discover, oh, this is how many pages the book will be, and therefore the most appropriate size is a certain size, and it's not an A5. Can you see the trouble that you may have there? So if now, let's say you've designed the book cover to be an A5, and perhaps the printers, maybe it's a children's book, and they find that no, it's actually best for it to be a more narrower, or 7.5 inches by 7.5 inch book, right? Maybe they find that it's best for it to be like that, or they find it's best to be 7 by 10 inches, which is closer to an A4, right? So now you have designed a book cover with the size A5 in mind. When it comes to printing, can you imagine how much the quality of the book cover will be compromised, because won't fit the size of the actual book size that's been determined by the ink designer and the typesetter? That is the problem. So you need to know the book size before the design is done, because it will also help the illustrator. For instance, if you have a children's book, for instance, or there is just a particular design that you want, it will help the illustrator to then design, or will help the graphic designer to then know how much space they must use, how big or how small the size of the illustration will be. So you have to keep that in mind. The second thing that you need to keep in mind is the fact that the book cover is not just the front and the back. There's also a spine, right? So which means then that the spine has to match the thickness of the book. So designing of a book cover is not just about the front and back. The cover needs to cover the whole book, including the thickness of it. Now, it's very important for you to also determine what that size of the spine will be, because it's going to mess up how the book will look like in the end. And that is why communication will need to be made between the printers and the designer and the typesetter and the book cover designer. So the book cover designer, the person that designs the interior of the book, the person that does the typesetting, and the printers, all of those stakeholders, they all need to be on the same page. One can't do their own design without knowing the specifications from the printers. And that is the benefit of having the publishing process being done under one organization. because then that way the process is then known, where the people that are working on the book are able to communicate with each other and be on one page concerning the book project. Okay, now I'll cover the second and last aspect of the book when it comes to printing, right? So the other aspect of printing besides the book cover is now the book. There's something called a bleed, and that is actually the extra space that is added onto the manuscript or onto each page, right? And the whole point of having the bleed is to make sure that should there be any errors in printing, for instance, if the printing job is done in a bit of a skew way, then at least there's that extra space, there's that room that has been made for that mistake, so that when the printers print, then they know that, okay, there is no part of the page of the book that's cut off because there's extra space that was allowed. Then they'll be able to trim the book in accordance with the size that was determined by the designer of the interior of the book. And the mistake that some may do is now when there is no bleed, right? When there is no bleed, then it's highly likely that your book will be trimmed into a smaller size than the original trim size that was determined during the stage where the designing of the interior of the book was done. And the other thing that we also need to be aware of is making that extra space as well to cater for the spine, especially when the book is quite thick. So when the book is quite thick, there needs to be the extra space that is made for the spine, while also making sure at the end of the day the book is trimmed in accordance with the size that was determined during the designing of the interior of the book. Alright, so now I will demonstrate some of the things that I mentioned using one of the books that we helped self-publish last year. So this is one of the books that we helped self-publish. The size of the book is 5 inches by 8 inches. So we use inches when we work with printing. That's the measurement that we use. Otherwise we also use millimeters. And this is how thick the book actually is. Now it's very important to make sure that the thickness of the book is known so that the spine is created to match the size of the book, right? And if you notice as well, there's this extra space right here. Can you see that? And that caters for how the book will look like inside. Because what you don't want is you don't want the spine to cover a part of the margin, because at the end of the day, if that happens, then you will see that the size of the one margin is not the same as the size of the other margin, and that's not what we want. We want professionalism, right? So to make sure that the size of the margins on both sides is the same, then we would need this extra space. And that is why it's important to not have the size of the book cover to also not be exactly as the size of the book when the designing stage is done. That is why it's important to have that bleed, and that's why it's very important to have people who are aware of this, so that when they do the designing, they are very much aware of the process of printing and therefore cater for the printing job to make sure that at the end of the day, the final product is actually of good quality and nothing is compromised. And that is it from me regarding the printing and preparation thereof. Thank you so much for your time, and if you did enjoy this video and found it insightful, do give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe and click on that notification bell for new videos that will come up. Thank you, and I shall see you on the next video. Bye now.